So, when we talk about the British invasion of the 1960s, our minds usually jump straight to the massive global spectacles of the Beatles, right? Or maybe the rebellious, raw energy of the Rolling Stones. But, there was this entirely different third force at play, a band that completely bent the trajectory of rock music. And they didn't do it by conquering the world. They did it by just quietly looking out the window. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we are going to dive deep into Ray Davies and the Kinks and explore exactly how Ray became rock music's ultimate observer.
Think about how Ray Davies once described his absolute masterpiece, Waterloo Sunset. He said it was like an extract from a diary nobody was allowed to read. How brilliant is that? It instantly sets up this incredibly intimate, almost voyeuristic framing of his songwriting. He wasn't just up there performing for a massive crowd. It was more like he was letting us sneak a peek at his private, closely guarded observations.
So, let's start with Section 1, The Solitary Man, Finding Beauty in the Mundane.
Let's stick with Waterloo Sunset for a second. While all the other rock stars of the era were out chasing, the typical boy-girl romance or the wild excesses of rock stardom, Ray was writing this delicate, beautiful guitar ballad. And it's just about a solitary guy looking at his window, watching two lovers meet at a pretty dismal London train station. He had this unbelievable superpower to find deep, resounding meaning in perfectly ordinary, everyday moments that the rest of us literally just walk right past. And this approach? It was a massive departure from their peers. On one hand, you've got the Beatles and the Stones, rapidly expanding globally, totally outward-focused, putting on these massive stage shows and heavily chasing American blues. But then you have the Kinks. They were intensely localized on English life. They were reflecting inward, writing these tight, intimate character studies, and maintaining this posture of basically semi-detached observation. Honestly, it was a distinctly rebellious move to look inward when literally the entire rest of the world was looking out.
Moving on to Section 2, Turning Inward, the band that changed everything. 4. That is the exact number of years the Kinks were totally banned from touring in the United States. And this happened right at the absolute height of their early success. It was triggered by a messy, chaotic mix of union disputes, some behavior issues, and complex industry politics. But the result was that they were suddenly and completely cut off from the biggest music market in the world. But here's the thing, this isolation actually catalyzed an incredible evolution for Ray. Think about it. Back in 1964, they were practically inventing hard rock with the riff-heavy You Really Got Me, which, by the way, was a sound Dave Davies got by literally slicing his amplifier speaker with a razor blade. Wild, right? But once they were cut off from that American influence, things shifted. By 1966, Ray moves into biting satirical social commentary with tracks like A Well-Respected Man. Fast forward to 1968, and he's creating deeply nostalgic, complex community studies like the Village Green album. And by 1973, he has fully transitioned into these massive, macro-societal theatrical operas. That US band really could have ended their entire career, but instead it turned Ray Davies into an unparalleled storyteller.
Which brings us to Section 3, Preserving the Village Green, Widening the Lens to the Community.
To truly capture those fading English traditions, Ray did something amazing. He elevated rock music by channeling literal literary and pastoral giants. We're talking inspirations ranging from Dylan Thomas's radio drama Under Milkwood and George Orwell's Coming Up for Air, all the way to the pastoral poetry of William Blake. Not to mention, he was heavily drawing on his own childhood memories of Fortis Green and Waterloo Park. He was using the standard everyday medium of pop music to rigorously study and document dying English customs. It's like he was preserving history on vinyl.
In doing this, he was really tapping into a cultural wave known at the time as heritage escapism. Basically, after the Second World War, there was this massive surge across English popular culture to revive an idealized rural version of the past. Ray's 1968 masterpiece, The Kinks Are the Village Green Preservation Society, is just the absolute perfect embodiment of this reaction against rapid modernization. He was watching the world change way too fast around him, and he decided to mentally escape into and aggressively protect the heritage that was literally being paved over. And the character studies on that album, they are so incredibly specific and sharply observed. Take the song Do You Remember Walter? In it, Ray notes the quiet tragedy of a demythologized, fat, married, early-to-bed childhood friend. Or Big Sky, which he actually got the idea for while watching businessmen from a balcony at a Cannes hotel. He writes from the perspective of this unsympathetic God just looking down on ordinary human problems. And then in People Take Pictures of Each Other, he points out the utter absurdity of using photographs to prove you even exist.
Through all of this, he was operating as this detached yet deeply, deeply philosophical observer of the village.
Now, let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, Class, Culture, and Critiques, Society under the Microscope. To really understand his critiques of the class system, we have to talk about Ray's brilliant use of duality. He basically pioneered this genius songwriting dynamic where he would contrast biting, cynical lyrics with these upbeat, joyful, incredibly catchy pop arrangements. He mixed sharp, class-based sarcasm with this profound empathy, and he did it in a way that tricked you into tapping your foot while he completely skewered the societal system. It is the ultimate Trojan horse tactic, right? A sad song perfectly wrapped up in a happy melody.
And Ray was able to pull this off so well precisely because he operated as a semi-detached outsider. Because of his unique upbringing, he was constantly moving between the working-class environment of Holloway and the more middle-class suburb of Fortisgreen. Since he had a foot in both of those worlds, he could kind of sit back, neutrally observe, and gently poke fun at the rigid rules, the neuroses, and the strict conventions of both working and middle-class societies. He was effectively questioning the entire narrative of 60s progress, from the inside out. I think his worldview from that era is perfectly summed up in a super revealing 1966 quote. He said, "I hope England doesn't change. I hope we don't get swallowed up by America and Europe." Ultimately, his core motivation was just this fierce, protective nostalgia for English culture. He didn't care about taking sides in partisan politics at all. He just genuinely wanted people to preserve and appreciate the unique culture they had sitting right in front of them. And that brings us to our final act, Section 5, The Ultimate Observer, the theatrical era. So as the 1970s arrived, Ray's role as an observer actually physically shifted. He fully transitioned from writing those tight 3-minute pop poems into directing massive theatrical rock operas right on stage. We're talking about huge works like Preservation, Soap Opera, and Schoolboys in Disgrace. To evaluate this admittedly eccentric era fairly, we have to understand that he wasn't just trying to cut radio hits anymore. He was building entire narrative worlds. He was completely changing art forms, moving from writing poems to staging full-blown plays. And when you build grand narrative worlds, you need a proxy to guide the audience, right? Enter the everyman. This is an ordinary, humble character who represents the typical human being, often serving as a completely powerless bystander. To fill this exact role on stage during his Preservation act, Ray created a character simply known as the Tramp. Now, the Tramp very directly mirrored Ray's own worldview. As a character, he acts as a remarkably keen societal observer, and he really embodies Ray's vision of an intimate, human-scaled balance in the world. But he's also a powerless bystander caught in the middle of these grand, sweeping power struggles. He rejects both capitalistic greed and rigid fundamentalism, making the Tramp the absolute ultimate voyeur. He's just watching all these senseless battles unfold around him, exactly the way Ray did through his music. As we start to wrap up this explainer, there's a remarkably self-aware quote from Ray Davies himself that just perfectly encapsulates his entire journey. He once admitted, "My work is better than I am. I just don't live up to it. I'd love to be as good as Waterloo Sunset." Honestly, Ray recognized that the empathetic, keen observer in his songs, the guy who could find such profound beauty in the everyday, the one who could perfectly capture a fleeting moment in time, that guy represented the absolute best version of himself. Which leaves us with a final thought I want you to take away today. Ask yourself, how often do you take the time to simply stop, look out the window, and actually observe the mundane beauty of the changing world around you? In our incredibly fast-paced lives, where we're always looking for the next big thing, maybe we could all use just a little bit more of Ray Davies' voyeuristic appreciation for the ordinary. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep observing, and I'll catch you next time.